The rain fell hard that night. Each drop struck the concrete walls of the underground garage like tiny hammers, creating an echo that swallowed every sound. Somewhere above, the city pulsed with neon and noise, but down here it was only rain and silence. Emma Carson tightened her coat and pressed the key fob again and again, praying her car would blink to life. But her Mercedes sat motionless 20 feet away, wrapped in shadows. A cold realization crept over her. She wasn't alone. 3 men emerged from the darkness. Not rushing, not reckless. They moved with purpose, sliding into position until they had her boxed in. Their faces were calm, practiced, as if they had done this 100 times before. Violence, for them, was just another transaction. Emma's breath caught in her throat. Her pulse thundered. She took one slow step back. And then everything changed. From behind a concrete pillar, a figure stepped out. His jacket was old, worn, damp with rain. In his hand, a smaller hand, a girl's. No more than 6 years old. Her tiny fingers clung trustingly to his. He moved before Emma could even scream. A blur, a shadow made of muscle and instinct. The first attacker collapsed to his knees, choking on air that refused to enter his lungs. The second flew backward into a pillar with a sickening crack, the kind that only bone makes against stone. The third tried to run, his shoes slipping on wet pavement, but he didn't make it more than 2 steps before the stranger had him pinned, face first on the ground, unconscious in seconds. The whole fight lasted less than 10 heartbeats. Emma froze. Her chest rose and fell rapidly, the world tilting around her. The man turned, gathering his daughter into his arms. The little girl clutched her stuffed rabbit, watching with calm, unblinking eyes. Not afraid, only trusting. The man didn't linger. He walked away with the girl pressed close, disappearing into the labyrinth of rain and shadows. Moments later, sirens wailed in the distance, their red and blue lights painting broken patterns across the slick garage walls. His name was Michael Hayes, though almost no one in Boston knew it. He was 36 years old. But truthfully, only the last 7 years of his life truly mattered. Every morning at precisely 6:45, he walked his daughter, Sophia, to school. Their boots splashed in rhythm on the wet sidewalks of Jamaica Plain. In autumn, the crunch of leaves added a harmony. In winter, the crisp crackle of snow. These small sounds, ordinary, human, gentle, had become the soundtrack of his new life. A life meant for peace, not war. Because once, Michael's footsteps had been different. Heavy boots, synchronized with others, marching across foreign soil. Those echoes still haunted his dreams. To his neighbors, he was the quiet single father who worked part-time at Murphy's Kitchen, a greasy little diner that smelled of bacon and burnt coffee no matter the hour. Mrs. Rodriguez, 2 doors down, sometimes watched Sophia after school. She always said the girl never complained, never demanded, as if she instinctively knew that invisibility was a kind of protection. At Murphy's, Michael cooked with precision that felt more like choreography than kitchen work. His knife moved fast, 40, 50 slices a minute, each cut perfect, each piece identical. To the untrained eye, it looked like a chef's skill. To someone who knew better, it looked like muscle memory forged in another life. A life of missions and shadows. His apartment was stripped bare of history. 2 beds. 1 table worn with years of use. Sophia's crayon drawings covered the fridge, castles, butterflies, smiling suns. But not a single photo from the years before she came into his life. No medals. No uniforms. No ghosts. And yet, behind walls only he knew how to open, there were passports in 3 different names. $40,000 in unmarked bills. A Glock with a serial number filed away. Insurance for a day he prayed would never come. Sophia wasn't like other children. She never asked about her mother. She never begged to visit grandparents. She already understood, at just 6 years old, that some questions weren't safe to ask. That silence could protect more than words. Their life together existed inside a fragile bubble of routine. Mornings filled with braiding hair, his large, calloused hands weaving French braids tighter than playground games could ever undo. Evenings spent with storybooks, his voice soft as he read about kind dragons and brave princesses. Never soldiers, never shadows. But peace has a way of cracking when the past comes knocking. And Michael's past had many names. None of them forgiving. Emma Carson kept replaying that night in her mind. The man, the little girl, the ruthless precision. Who was he really? She didn't know it yet, but their worlds were already on a collision course. And the storm was only beginning. By the time she was 34, Emma Carson had already become a storm wrapped in designer fabric. To the world, she was the CEO who had turned a garage startup called Summit Edge into a $2 billion empire. To those who knew her best, she was a force of nature, relentless, brilliant, and untouchable. But what no one could see was the ghost behind her eyes. 10 years earlier, Emma had lost the only person she couldn't live without. Her younger sister, Sarah, murdered by a stalker who had tracked her every movement through the cracks of social media. One breach, one obsession, one moment of horror. That night had split Emma in two. The carefree MIT graduate vanished, and in her place was forged a woman on a mission to build technology not to expose, but to protect. Not to hand power to predators, but to shield the vulnerable. Summit Edge's newest creation was her most dangerous and most brilliant idea yet. An artificial intelligence system, nicknamed Sarah, that could predict cyber attacks before they happened. It didn't just block intrusions. It learned, adapted, outpaced even the fastest human hacker. Governments wanted it. Corporations salivated over it. And the kind of people who thrived in shadows, they wanted it most of all. 2 years ago, Emma herself had been hacked. Her phone, her laptop, her private messages. It wasn't just data theft. It felt intimate, invasive, like someone had reached through the screen and touched her soul with dirty hands. She had barely survived the fallout of that breach. And since then, paranoia became her armor. Only one man had earned her trust. Marcus Webb, her head of security, a former Navy intelligence officer who understood that the deadliest attacks were the ones you never saw coming. He had been with her since the garage days, and he never sugar-coated reality. But even Marcus couldn't protect her from the betrayal that came next. The morning after the garage incident, Emma sat frozen in her office, staring at the footage on repeat. The man, the little girl, the speed, the precision. This wasn't a weekend karate hobbyist, Marcus muttered beside her, arms crossed. This is government-level training. Years of it. Emma paused the video on a single frame, the moment the man looked straight into the security camera. His eyes cut through the shadow, cold, assessing, calculating, not asking if the lens was a threat, deciding if it was. And then silence. Within 48 hours, the video had leaked. Not by accident. Not by a sloppy whistleblower. By design. It spread online like wildfire. Edited. Framed. Packaged for maximum virality. Strangers on the internet became detectives overnight. Frame by frame, they dissected his movements. Military veterans weighed in, pointing out the precision, the pressure points, the textbook takedowns. Every detail screamed of a man who was trained to vanish, not to be found. And yet, his face led nowhere. No facial recognition match. No military record. No trace. It was as if the man had been scrubbed from existence. Emma's instinct screamed that this was no coincidence. Someone wanted the world to see him, and someone wanted him exposed. For Michael Hayes, the video was a death sentence. He learned of it the same way everyone else did, in the silence that followed him into Sophia's schoolyard. Parents stopped mid-conversation when he arrived. Teachers who once barely nodded now greeted him with nervous laughter. Voices pitched too high. Strangers stared too long. Everyone had seen it. Michael said nothing. He carried on. Routine was survival. But on the third afternoon, he noticed the sedan. Black. Windows tinted. Parked across from a school. Engine humming. Exhaust modified. Too expensive, too specific. Not civilian. The fourth day, there were 2 sedans. Rotating positions. Overlapping fields of view. Standard surveillance formation. Professional. Patient. Watching him. That night, while Sophia hummed softly at the kitchen table, coloring butterflies in bright pinks and blues, Michael opened the bag he had hoped never to touch again. Fresh batteries in the flashlights, clean ammunition, updated maps of train lines and bus routes. And at the bottom, the encrypted phone he had kept charged but dormant for 7 years. When it lit up for the first time, the glow was ghostly, like resurrecting a life he had sworn was dead. Emma's investigators had been working backwards, searching property records, school registrations, employment files. And they found him, Michael Hayes, 36, a man who only seemed to exist on paper for the last 7 years. Before that, nothing. A void. The kind of void you had to work very, very hard to create. So Emma walked straight into Murphy's kitchen during the lunch rush. She spotted him at the grill, flipping burgers with the same smooth economy of movement she'd seen in the footage. Their eyes met. He stiffened, the faintest shift of muscle in his jaw. Then he turned back to his work, as if she were invisible. She waited until his shift ended, then followed him into the alley. He lit a cigarette he never intended to smoke, buying himself the illusion of a reason to linger. Their conversation lasted 12 minutes. "I need your help," she told him simply. "Not interested," he replied, voice flat final. But then she mentioned the sedan outside Sophia's school, the men asking questions, the pattern of surveillance she had traced. The cigarette crumbled in his fist. His silence spoke louder than words. Emma's offer shifted then. Not a job, an alliance. Protection for both of them. Neither trusted the other. But trust was no longer an option. Survival was. That night, as Sophia slept soundly in the next room, Michael sat in the dark, loading magazines in steady rhythm. Every click echoed like a clock counting down. He had promised his daughter safety. But promises were fragile things. And the storm was closing in. From the beginning, Michael and Emma lived in two different worlds. Emma's life was measured in calendars and precision. Meetings scheduled down to the minute. Security escorts. Boardrooms where fortunes rose and fell with a flick of her words. Michael's life, by contrast, was fluid. Every step mapped to escape routes. Every building assessed for threats. He didn't plan months ahead. He planned seconds. So when they sat across from each other for their first official security briefing, the clash was inevitable. Emma spread neatly typed schedules across the table. "This is the routine I follow every week. I need you to optimize it." Michael didn't even glance at the paper. Instead, he looked at her, then at the doors, the windows, the corners of the room. His eyes cataloged every vulnerability like a machine. 17 points of failure, he said flatly. "If I were them, you'd be dead before lunch." Her brows arched. Them, whoever's watching, whoever sent the cars, whoever leaked that video. He leaned back, arms crossed. "Call it paranoia if you want. I call it math." Emma bristled. She wasn't used to being dismissed. Not in her company. Not in her life. "You think you can do better than my team?" He reached into his bag and slid a tablet across the table. Photos. The same men. The same cars. Taken at different angles over 3 days. Patterns, rotations, sloppy mistakes. Emma stared. Her throat tightened. She wanted to argue. Instead, she whispered, "How long have you known?" "Long enough." The silence between them was thick. Uneasy. But beneath it, an understanding formed. Neither trusted the other. But they didn't need trust. They needed results. It was Sophia who changed everything. One afternoon, her school closed early. Emma had no choice but to let Michael bring the girl to the Summit Edge offices. In the glass-walled conference room, a space usually reserved for multi-million-dollar negotiations, Sophia sat at the head of the table with a coloring book, her feet swinging. Emma watched quietly as Michael transformed before her eyes. Gone was the cold, calculating fighter she'd first seen on the video. Here was a father, gentle and patient, braiding Sophia's hair when she grew restless, helping her with math homework in a voice low and kind. At one point, Sophia's stomach growled. Without a word, Michael slipped into the executive kitchen. 20 minutes later, he returned with a meal plated like something from a 5-star restaurant. Emma caught herself staring, not at the food, but at the way Sophia looked at him. Absolute trust. No hesitation. No fear. When Sophia yawned and curled up on the conference room sofa, Michael draped his jacket over her. Then he took a seat by the door, posture straight, eyes on the hall, guarding her even in sleep. For the first time in 2 years, Emma felt something she hadn't allowed herself to feel. Safe. The Boston International Tech Summit was supposed to be her victory. 43 countries. Hundreds of corporations. The unveiling of her AI system, Sarah, in all its glory. The convention center had been transformed into a cathedral of innovation. Holograms shimmered. Screens hummed with promises of the future. Emma stood at the podium the night before, rehearsing her speech under the cavernous ceiling. Her words echoed back at her, sharp and powerful. This was it, her moment. But in the shadows, Michael was already pacing the halls, counting exits, memorizing choke points. He saw what her security team did not. Predictable patrols, blind spots, casual stances with weapons slung too low. He wrote a 17-page report and handed it to Corbin Hayes, the head of convention security, a man with 3 decades of police work behind him and an ego to match. Corbin barely glanced at the pages. "You're just a glorified babysitter," he sneered. "Stay in your corner, look intimidating, and let professionals handle the rest." Michael said nothing, but his jaw tightened. He'd seen this kind of arrogance before, and arrogance always bled. The explosion came at 9:17 a.m., half an hour before Emma's keynote. It wasn't big enough to collapse the building, just big enough to send shock waves rattling through the halls, ceiling tiles crashing down, windows shattering. The crowd erupted into panic. Screams. Running feet. Security scrambled toward the blast site. But Michael didn't move toward it. He grabbed Emma, yanking her down as glass rained around them. His body shielded hers, his hand pressed against the back of her head to protect her skull. The blast was no accident. It was a message. A warning. "Stay down," he hissed. His eyes scanned the chaos, not for flames or debris, but for what came next. The real attack. But nothing followed. No gunfire. No second blast. Just sirens. Panic. The thunder of approaching media. Emma's heart raced, adrenaline burning through her. When the noise finally dulled, she pulled herself to her feet. Her designer suit was streaked with dust and glass. Her hands shook. But when she stepped onto the podium, cameras flashing, her voice was steady as stone. "I want you all to know something," she said, staring straight into the lenses. "I trust Michael Hayes with my life. His actions saved me and many of you today. And let me be clear, Summit Edge will not be intimidated. Not by fear. Not by threats. Not by anyone." The crowd erupted in applause. But Michael, standing in the shadows at the edge of the stage, felt no triumph. Only certainty. This was just the beginning. That night, as Boston's skyline glittered like 1,000 silent witnesses, Michael pieced together the breadcrumbs left behind. They led to one name whispered in war zones and corporate boardrooms alike. Blackstone Industries. And behind it, a man who knew Emma too well. The game had begun. The trail was too clean. Every wire transfer, every false company, every offshore account. All breadcrumbs leading to the same place. On paper, it was just another private military contractor. In reality, it was a viper's nest of mercenaries and corporate spies. And in the shadows behind it, a man who made Michael's gut twist the moment Emma said his name. Venture capitalist. Polished, powerful, dripping charm. He had once courted Emma with roses and rare wines. Now he was circling like a shark, furious that she had denied him her crown jewel, the AI known as Sarah. Michael wasn't surprised. Men like Vaughn didn't just want power. They believed it was owed to them. Emma confronted Vaughn at the Beacon Hill Society, a place that smelled of leather, scotch, and old money. Vaughn sat at a chessboard playing against himself, a performance, as if to remind the room that he always controlled both sides. He poured a glass of whiskey, swirling the liquid gold as though the world itself were in his palm. "Emma," he said, his voice velvet over steel, "the future is war." Whoever owns your AI will own the century. Surely you see that. You mean whoever owns it will decide who lives and who dies, she shot back. He smiled, sliding a queen across the board. Exactly. Don't think of it as control. Think of it as inevitability. When she didn't answer, he leaned closer. His eyes glittered. You sound like your sister, Sarah. She wanted to change the world too. And we both know how that ended. The glass in Emma's hand shattered. Whiskey dripped like blood between her fingers. But her voice never wavered. If you touch what matters to me, Clinton, I'll erase you so completely. History will forget you ever lived. Vaughn only laughed. A slow, indulgent sound. The kind a man makes when he believes he's already won. That night, in the dim glow of Emma's office, Michael finally broke a silence. There's something you need to know, he said. His hands trembled as though every word dragged knives across his soul. I wasn't just a soldier. I was part of a unit that doesn't officially exist. 12 of us. We were called the Shadow Unit. He told her how they had been trained not just to fight, but to vanish. Not just to kill, but to prevent wars before they began. Ghosts who slipped through borders to save lives that never knew they were in danger. But then the missions changed. The targets shifted. From warlords to journalists. From terrorists to humanitarians. When we asked questions, Michael said, voice low, we started dying. One by one. Accidents. Ambushes. Until there were only 2 of us left. His eyes darkened. I grabbed my daughter from her mother's dying arms in Prague, and I ran. I shed my identity like skin. And for 7 years, I've been no one. For the first time since she'd met him, Emma saw his mask slip. Saw the raw wound beneath the man. His whole life had been rebuilt on fear, not for himself, but for the small girl who was his only anchor. Emma whispered, and now they found you again. Michael nodded, and they won't stop. The phone rang at 3 a.m. Michael answered on the first buzz. On the other end was Sophia. Her little voice trembled, repeating a phrase that didn't belong to her. Someone had taught her what to say. Daddy, Mr. Rabbit's lonely. He wants you to come get us. Down by the old place where the ships used to sleep. The line went dead. Michael's chest constricted. His hands curled into fists. For a moment, the room spun. When Emma arrived minutes later, she found every weapon Michael owned laid out on the kitchen table. Handguns, knives, clips of ammunition stacked with military precision. His face was stone, but his eyes burned with something primal. The phone rang again. This time, it wasn't Sophia. A man's voice. Cold. Controlled. If you want the girl back, bring the AI prototype. East Boston Shipyard. Midnight. Emma's throat tightened. We'll do it. I'll bring it. Michael said nothing. The only sound in the room was the metallic click of another magazine sliding home. The East Boston Shipyard was a graveyard of rust and salt. Broken warehouses loomed like skeletons, their steel bones creaking in the wind. The ocean lapped against rotting piers, whispering secrets no one wanted to hear. Clinton had chosen well. Multiple escape routes by land and sea. Enough ambient noise from the harbor to drown the sound of gunfire. It was the perfect place for a deal. Or an execution. Emma arrived in a sleek black armored van, the AI prototype in a biometric case handcuffed to her wrist. Her heels clicked against the wet concrete, each step echoing like a countdown. Clinton waited with 10 men, mercenaries who moved with the same lethal grace Michael once had. Their rifles caught the dim glow of sodium lamps. Between them stood Sophia, clutching her rabbit, chin lifted with the quiet bravery of a child who believed her father would come. She was right. Michael wasn't with Emma. He was below, moving through the old maintenance tunnels. The water there was black as oil, tasting of rust and chemicals. Every stroke of his arms pulled him closer. Every kick against the current carried him through darkness, where only monsters should swim. When he finally surfaced in a drainage pipe 50 meters from the dock, the night air tasted like freedom and fire. He raised his rifle, an old Mark V scope he trusted like an old friend, and counted targets. The man holding Sophia's hand was left-handed. That meant a half-second delay if he tried to draw. The sniper on the roof used outdated night vision that could be fried with one flash of infrared. The others were positioned by the book, predictable, textbook, and Clinton arrogant, exposed, standing where he believed money made him untouchable. Through the scope, Michael heard it. Sophia's voice, soft but steady, telling one of the guards about butterfly migrations, trying to be brave for her rabbit. Michael marked that guard first. Anyone who could be distracted by a child's voice was too dangerous to live. As Emma stepped forward with the briefcase, Clinton smiled like a king about to crown himself. But in the shadows of the rusting shipyard, Michael tightened his finger on the trigger. The night was about to explode. The wind off the harbor howled through broken beams, carrying the metallic tang of salt and rust. The shipyard was a graveyard, and tonight it would drink fresh blood. Emma walked carefully across the cracked concrete, the biometric briefcase chained to her wrist. Her every movement was deliberate, visible. A lamb among wolves, except her eyes burned like steel. Clinton Vaughn stood in the open, his smile stretched thin across his face. 10 mercenaries surrounded him, weapons ready. And between them, Sophia, small, defiant, clutching her rabbit as though it were armor. Beautiful, Clinton purred, spreading his arms like a benevolent king. The AI, the woman who built it, and the ghost who guards her. He didn't know Michael was already there. Beneath the dripping tunnels, Michael had swum through black water that tasted of oil and decay. He emerged like something dredged from the deep, rifle raised, eyes locked on his targets. His breathing slowed, his pulse leveled. He became what he had once been trained to be. Nothing, no one, a shadow. Emma reached the halfway point. The lights above flickered. Clinton's voice carried across the water. Hand it over, Emma. Be wise for once in your life. The sniper on the roof shifted, his night vision scope glowing faintly. Michael's laser pulsed once, a flash invisible to the naked eye. The scope went blind. The sniper blinked, confused. Michael's first shot silenced him forever. The second shot tore through the wrist of a left-handed mercenary gripping Sophia. He collapsed with a scream, dropping his weapon. Sophia bolted toward the nearest barrier, her rabbit clutched tight. Chaos erupted. Gunfire exploded in the night. Mercenaries swung their rifles, but Michael was already moving. A blur between cover, every shot precise, every kill merciless. He knew their formations. He knew their drills. He had written the playbook. To them, he was a phantom tearing through flesh and steel. To Sophia, watching from behind a slab of concrete, he was just Dad, fighting for her with the fury of a storm. Emma ducked behind a barrier, yanking Sophia into her arms. The girl buried her face against her shoulder, trembling but alive. Clinton roared orders, his calm unraveling as his expensive mercenaries fell like dominoes. "You think you can win, Hayes?" he shouted, pulling a pistol from his tailored coat. "You can't fight money. You can't fight inevitability." Michael stepped into the open, blood streaking his arm, his face carved from stone. "Try me." It ended not with spectacle, but with precision. Emma unlocked the briefcase. Instead of the AI prototype, a virus detonated through Clinton's own phone, piggybacking on his encrypted network. Years of Blackstone secrets, assassinations, bribes, offshore accounts, uploaded in seconds to FBI and Interpol servers. Clinton's empire crumbled before his eyes. "No," he whispered, panic breaking his voice. He raised his pistol, hand shaking. Michael moved faster. His knife flashed once, slicing the tendons in Clinton's wrist. The gun clattered to the ground, and the man who thought himself untouchable fell to his knees, crying out for lawyers and connections that no longer mattered. But victory always demands its price. A shot rang out from a hidden angle, one Michael hadn't accounted for. The bullet tore through his shoulder, spinning him backward. Blood sprayed across the concrete in jagged patterns. Emma screamed. Sophia sobbed. But Michael didn't stop. He fought through the pain, dropping the last gunman with brutal finality. Then he staggered, barely standing, his breath ragged. He looked at Sophia, wide-eyed and shaking, clutching her rabbit. And he smiled. Because he had promised her. She would never see him stop fighting for her. The sirens came quickly, too quickly. FBI. SWAT. As if they had been waiting, tipped off by coordinates no one could explain. Emma clutched Michael's blood-soaked shirt as paramedics swarmed him. Her tears fell freely now, staining the fabric. She hadn't cried in a decade, not since Sarah's funeral. Sophia held his hand the whole way, whispering, "Don't leave me, Daddy. We still have to finish the princess story." Michael's lips curved into a faint smile. "This one," he rasped, "will have a happy ending." Recovery was long. 3 months of hospitals and rehab, each day a battlefield of pain and small victories. Sophia turned the sterile white walls into an art gallery, covering them with crayon drawings of butterflies, heroes, and families holding hands. Emma came every afternoon, at first with her usual precision, 1 hour, never more. But over time, she stayed longer. Coffee in hand, books for Sophia, quiet conversations that stretched into the night. And slowly, the walls Emma had built around her heart began to crack. One evening, while Sophia slept curled at the foot of Michael's bed, Emma whispered, "Do you trust me?" Michael's eyes met hers. Tired, scarred, but alive. "Trust isn't given. It's built," he said softly. "And we're building it." Months later, when Clinton Vaughn's trial rocked the nation with revelations of corruption, Emma testified for 7 hours straight. Calm, unshakable, a queen delivering judgment. Summit Edge launched Sarah into the world with one condition: ethical restrictions that rejected billions in dirty contracts. The world called Emma untouchable. Michael knew better. He had seen her bleed. He had seen her heal. And Sophia, once the child who knew not to ask questions, laughed more now. She braided Emma's hair the way her father once braided hers. She learned to code butterflies on Emma's laptop, filling screens with digital wings. They had saved each other, in blood and in tenderness. On an autumn afternoon, Boston Common glowed with fiery leaves. Families laughed. Musicians played. Sophia ran ahead, scattering pigeons with laughter that sounded like bells. Michael and Emma walked side by side, their hands brushing until finally, inevitably, they laced together. "Do you ever wish you'd stayed hidden?" Emma asked quietly. Michael looked at her, then at his daughter twirling in the leaves. "Peace without purpose isn't peace," he said. "It's just waiting to die. You gave me something worth stepping back into the light for." Emma's eyes softened. "We saved each other, didn't we?" Michael squeezed her hand. "No, she saved us both." They watched Sophia race back toward them, her arms full of leaves, her eyes shining. She handed one to Emma. "This one's for you, because it's strong." She gave another to Michael. "And this one's for you, because it's brave." Then she held up a golden leaf. "And this one's for all of us, because it's beautiful even though it fell." Michael looked at Emma. Emma looked at Sophia. And for the first time, the ghost, the warrior, and the child felt whole. If you had to choose, would you live hidden in peace, or step into danger to fight for something greater? What would you do if the past came knocking on your quiet life?